Thank you, Speaker, and I grieve, much to the support there from the member for Frankston, but I grieve for the state of Victoria, and for the years we've watched as the Allan Labor Government has failed to keep our communities safe. We've seen the devastating consequences of weak bail laws, rising violent crime, and a government that is completely beholden to the corrupt and violent unions like the CFMEU. The Allan Labor Government has prioritised bikies and criminal gangs over public safety, and it's Victorians who are paying the price. Bail law fails and rising crime are taking control of our state, and we've got a crime crisis here in Victoria. We've got a car stolen at a rate of every 20 minutes. We've seen a 15% increase in crime and 19 residential aggravated burglaries every day. Youth crime is out of control. Crimes committed by children aged 10 to 17 rose to their highest levels since 2009, with more than 23,000 incidents, up by almost 17% year on year. Youth offenders aged 14 to 17 responsible for most child crime, with more than 20,000 incidents and a 20% year-on-year increase. More than 10,000 knives, daggers and swords have been found by Victoria Police at roughly 40 a day, and retail theft has risen by 32%. It's all because the Allan Labor Government has stripped Victoria Police of essential move-on powers, failed to tackle family violence effectively, and allowed youth crime to spiral out of control. The justice system is failing to hold repeat offenders accountable, and this government weakened bail laws back in March 2024. This government caused this mess, and they're not the ones to clean it up. The government has failed to fill the around 1,000 vacancies at Victoria Police, and they've cut the community crime prevention budget by more than 46%. This week, the government introduced their so-called toughest bail laws in Australia for repeat serious offenders, and the tough bail test is not in the bill that was passed. The Allan Labor Government has failed to deliver on a promise they made, now saying that any change will be delayed for months. The offence of committing an indictable offence whilst on bail was reinstated, but will have absolutely no impact on raising the test for bail. Previously, a person charged with this offence faced an uplifted test to stay on bail. This was not in Labor's bill, and as I said, any change will be delayed. The offence of breaching bail conditions was reinstated, but in a weakened form, as contravention will not result in the offender facing a stronger bail test. Serious offences, including burglary and robbery, are not listed as Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 offences, meaning alleged offenders received a presumption of bail and the weakest test to receive it. This government has refused to reverse its cuts to Crime Services Victoria, including a $19.1 million cut this year, and a $58 million cut in 27-28 is upon us, which are contributing to trial delays and seeing more alleged offenders being offered bail. People under 18 years face no criminal sanction for breaching bail conditions, undermining the reason why bail conditions are imposed. Now, in the last year, since Labor weakened bail laws, we've seen over 570,000 offences committed. In the last year, since Labor weakened bail laws, over 1,500 offences committed every single day. In the year Labor weakened bail laws, over 68,000 more offences were committed. And in the year since Labor weakened bail laws, that's 188 more offences committed every single day. Over the past decade, under this government, crime has surged by a staggering 28%, with 2024 marking a significant escalation compared to the year ending September 2014. We've all heard the youth bail stories in this state. A 15-year-old prolific car thief released on his 55th count of bail. The teen has 208 police charges against him, including arson, car theft, violent assaults, among others. And despite concerns for public safety, the teen continually tells the police and judges that they want to hear what they want to hear, and is subsequently released only to re-offend days later. Or the 14-year-old with 380 charges released on bail in June 2024. That individual had participated in a string of crimes that had been struck out due to the rule where 10 to 14-year-olds can't be held criminally responsible. Or Jin Chi Lee, who was the offender in a brutal attack outside of a bar against his best friend, where Lee repeatedly beat him, nearly killing him. And despite these charges, Lee was released on bail until a yet-to-be-determined appeal is heard. We've seen the changes to the machete laws this week, and under Labor's weak laws, the sale and distribution of machetes will be allowed to continue for another 6 months. A 6-month amnesty giving a green light to criminals to stock up before a ban comes into place. Those on this side of the House, the Liberals and Nationals, want to restrict the sale of machetes immediately, prohibiting the sale of these weapons without appropriate exemptions. And furthermore, Labor's 6-month delay to classify machetes as a prohibited weapon is unacceptable, and an amendment brought forward today by the Liberals and Nationals to move that date forward by 3 months to ensure we get machetes out of the community as soon as possible was voted down by the Allan Labor Government. For years, this government has dragged its heels on machetes and knife crime, and that inaction must stop. On this side, we have a plan to get machetes off store shelves immediately and ban these deadly weapons forever. Every day machetes are available is another day a criminal can stop up on a deadly tool to terrorise and harm Victorians. And we know that on this side we've introduced on multiple occasions legislation to try to fix this. Back in November 2023, a private member's bill to amend the legislation to classify machetes as prohibited weapons, Labor opposed the bill. In February 2024, an amendment to the Firearms Act and in the Assembly to reclassify machetes from controlled to prohibited weapons, and Labor opposed this bill. In 21st of March 2024, we moved an amendment in the Council to reclassify machetes from controlled to prohibited weapons, and each time we brought these forward, Labor stifled debate and wouldn't listen to what the opposition has to say, and only under public pressure have they decided to actually take action. We've seen this week reports of CFMEU corruption and this government being in the pocket of those corrupt unions. We've got a Premier whose inability to manage money and corruption on government projects has led to billions of taxpayer dollars being wasted on their rotten big build. They're exacerbating the housing crisis and underfunding essential services like healthcare and education, and the Premier's failures are directly linked to the cost of living crisis, with Victorians paying the price through higher taxes, rents and mortgages. The government's mismanagement of major infrastructure projects, with cost blowouts exceeding more than $50 billion, Labor's failures are deepening Victoria's financial crisis, with infrastructure priorities in growth areas neglected. Back in 2022, the now Premier received credible allegations that the CFMEU officials were engaging in violent conduct in Victorian work sites, but she did absolutely nothing. In July last year, in relation to corruption on big build sites, the Premier said, "I outlined the very strong action that the government is taking to stamp out the rotten culture at its roots." Well, in July last year, the opposition, those on this side of the House, we tried to introduce a bill to this place to have police checks on government building sites, and it was the Allan Labor Government who voted that down. We introduced it to protect hard-working men and women from the criminal elements of the CFMEU. And since then, how many women have been subjected to sexual harassment, bullying, intimidation or bashings since the government voted that bill down? This government has failed to protect women on CFMEU sites, and it's not good enough. There were members in this House who said at the time when we introduced that bill, and I quote from the member for Bentley, "This is just a stunt. It's just a stunt because the opposition know the outcome of the vote we are about to take, because the government overwhelmingly has the numbers in this House. So because of the numbers in this House, the government voted down a bill that would have seen proper checks on those criminals on work sites, and we've seen the allegations this week. We've all seen the footage this week of women being bashed on government work sites because this government decided that they would put politics over the people of Victoria." We saw the member for Albert Park in this place say that we were issuing wild and woolly accusations, a wild and woolly rant plus all sorts of pretty scurrilous accusations. Wild and woolly accusations, she called them. And rather than flouncing about and making some pretty unfair and unwarranted accusations, well, when you look at what the member for Albert Park said last week, you have to question, is it a stunt to see a woman getting bashed on national TV? Is it a wild and woolly rant that a woman was locked in a storage room with someone who was convicted with threats to kill and stalking of women?
You are not in your place.
Was that wild and woolly accusations from the member for Albert Park, or was that legitimate?
Member for Albert Park.
Legitimate. You had the chance to stand up and defend it in this place. The member for Albert Park, the Melbourne
will not respond to interjections and contributions through the chair.
Thank you, Speaker. The member for Albert Park will have every opportunity to try to defend those words, but it was the member for Albert Park who said that in this chamber, and I would encourage members in this House to go back and read the contribution in Hansard from the member for Narrowcan.
For Albert Park, this is your last warning. You are not in your place.
Someone who actually has experience in this sector, who has seen it firsthand, read his contribution on that same day, to which the member for Albert Park and the member for Bentley said accusations that those on this side of the House were acting in the wrong way, and then 9 months later we see what we've seen in the last couple of weeks or the last week on 60 Minutes. It's completely unacceptable. We also know that the CFMEU donates straight to the Labor Party. So why are they not taking action when it comes to the conduct of the CFMEU? Because the CFMEU are affiliate members of the Labor Party, and they continually fund the campaigns that put this government into power. Would you take action if someone was funding your election campaigns? It's a fair question. The CFMEU received approximately $34 million from IncoLink last year. This money is meant to be for training in health and safety, but there's no oversight and no reporting on where that money is spent. The CFMEU does give a fair proportion of this money to the national branch, and in turn the national branch of the CFMEU return that money to the Victorian Labor Party, and that's why this government does nothing about it when it comes to CFMEU behaviour or corruption on its work sites. This government is more than happy to take CFMEU members' money, but does nothing to protect its workers. Nothing done for a decade, nothing will be done this week, nothing done to support those Victorians who need this government to take action. After 10 years of this Premier being a minister, being the Deputy Premier, being the Premier, the failures of Premier Allan continue to rack up day after day. And just in the time as Premier alone, we've seen the suburban rail loop blow out to $216 billion, and you'd question how much of that cost is because of the corruption, the payments to bikies, the payments to criminals involved with the CFMEU. We've seen her failure to take action against the corruption on building sites, costing taxpayers billions in projects overruns. We've seen youth crime surge, a 20% rise in youth crime under this Premier alone. We've seen road maintenance budgets slashed, leaving 91% of Victorian roads in poor condition. We saw them try to pose a health tax on GPs at a time when people are suffering and trying to get the health care that they deserve. We saw her as Deputy Premier and the Minister for the Commonwealth Games not understand or not be transparent about a $2 billion blowout to the cost of that event before she cancelled it at a more than $600 million cost to the Victorian taxpayer. We saw massive infrastructure cost overruns with things like the Westgate Tunnel, the Metro Tunnel projects, once again with CFMEU workers on site, with ghost shifts being paid for people who don't turn up to work, more than $10,000 a week for those people who refuse to turn up to work while still being paid government money. It's unacceptable, it's not acceptable. The Victorian people deserve better. But it's only those on this side of the House and a Batten-led Liberal and Nationals government who can fix Victoria's crisis. We'll introduce a right to ask and a right to know scheme that gives Victorians access to police information about a partner's violent history to help prevent family violence. We'll restore move-on powers for Victoria Police. We'll outlaw machetes now. We'll reinstate bail offence laws that give repeat offenders the consequences they deserve and will ban bikies from government projects. And I grieve for the people of Victoria under this government.